Welcome to Family Law Talk. Family Law Talk. Presented by Kirk Stange of Stange Law Firm, PC. Stange Law Firm is a multi-state family law firm. Now, here's your host, Kirk Stange.
Welcome to Family Law Talk. We have an interesting topic today. The topic is who prepares the settlement paperwork. And this episode today is based on an article on our blog, FamilyLawHeadquarters.com, dated September 8th, 2025. And the title of that article is Who Should Draft the Settlement Paperwork? So as a follow-up to the episode today, go on over to FamilyLawHeadquarters.com and read this blog article for more information. But let's go ahead and jump on into the topic at hand. Most individuals who are going through a divorce or family law matter would like to settle their case. That's just the reality. Very few people want a long contested case where the case costs a lot of money and takes a bunch of time. Nobody really wants that. Of course, the issue is the devil's in the details. And once you get into the details, lots of parties disagree on the substantive issues in the case, and that disagreement then leads to a lot of cases being very hard to settle. All right, but let's take a situation where the case is actually settled. The parties have an agreement on everything, which is a requirement. In terms of all the relevant issues, the parties have to agree. Okay, so let's take a situation where the parties actually agree, and this could have taken place many different ways based on the case. In some cases, the parties just agree out of the gates. From my experience as a lawyer, this is really pretty rare. Most parties want this to be the case, but rarely is it the case. But in some situations, this can actually happen. So take a case where the parties agree on the terms of a divorce right out of the gates. In other cases, it might require settlement offers going back and forth between the attorneys, so you're dealing with offers and counteroffers, and then let's take a situation where the parties eventually reach an agreement. In other cases, parties have to go to mediation, and they work with a mediator, and then at mediation, the hope is that they can come up with a resolution or a compromise in order to settle their case. And I've seen countless cases, I should say, and this is sort of the majority, if you will, which is the parties either settle in court, like on the courthouse steps, or maybe they're in court on a settlement conference or a pretrial conference, and the judge gives some recommendations for settlement. Let's say the parties settle in this kind of scenario, okay? Well, no matter how this takes place, when there's a settlement, then the issue is who's going to draft the settlement paperwork. And I think for a lot of parties, this seems immaterial. Most would think this isn't a big deal, but it can actually turn into a bigger deal than most people can actually realize, all right? So this can take place quite a bit different in a lot of cases, but what I see quite a bit, and have seen this throughout my career, is the parties divide up drafting the paperwork. So in other words, the lawyers for the husband and the lawyers for wife all draft different portions of the settlement paperwork, and then they compile this together. All right. In some cases, the guardian ad litem might even get involved in terms of drafting the parenting plan. And then the parties' lawyers draft the other portions of the paperwork. Of course, this sort of begs the question, why is there so much settlement paperwork that needs to be put together in order to resolve a case? And I understand why a lot of people would think that, but the truth is, in terms of the legal requirements, there is a lot of stuff that has to be put together in order to settle a case. So take a divorce, for example. There's going to be a judgment form or a divorce decree. And then if there's property and debt that has to be divided, there has to be a marital settlement and separation agreement. And this can be tedious and arduous because parties have to list all their property, all their debts. You got to have last four digits of account numbers in the settlement paperwork. If there's real estate, you've got to have the real estate description. And if there's vehicles, you got to have the vehicle identification numbers and various other things. So the marital settlement separation agreement can involve a lot of work. And then we talked about this before, but where there's kids, then there has to be what's called a parenting plan or custody schedule put together. All right, and this has to denote who gets the kids when in terms of each day of the week. And then you're dealing with holidays, you're dealing with summer visitation, and various other terms as well in terms of, how decisions are made. And if the parties can't agree, do they go to mediation? Do they go to arbitration? Do they have a parent coordinator or whatnot? And so all of that has to be in the parenting plan or custody schedule, and that can be quite arduous. And then in most states, child support calculations have to be done and attached to the judgment somehow or incorporated into the judgment somehow. And then you get into an issue of, in a lot of cases, parties sign affidavits so that they don't have to appear in court to have the judge sign the settlement paperwork. In some cases, that might not be possible, but you've got these affidavits as well. And you can translate this into different types of family law cases. If it's not a divorce, then you take out the marital settlement and separation agreement. For example, if it's a paternity case or if it's a modification or something like that, then you wouldn't need that, but you're still going to need, in most cases, this other paperwork. And so the question gets into, how is this paperwork drafted, okay? And in some cases, you're literally talking about 3 lawyers doing it. So you could have the attorney for the husband drafting part of the paperwork. You could have the attorney for the wife drafting another part of the paperwork. And let's say the guardian ad litem wants to do the parenting plan. So now you've got 3 lawyers involved trying to draft this paperwork, okay? And so the issue is this, and this is why it can be a big issue. I mean, once you get 3 attorneys involved, this process can become slow. You know, one attorney might draft this paperwork pretty quick. Another attorney might be busy, and it might take them a while. Okay? And so for parties who settle, most of the time, at least what I've seen, is they want to then get the case done quick. But there can be a period of weeks or months where parties are taking their time to have the paperwork put together because their lawyers have other cases and other things that they're doing, so they're taking their time. And then even when the paperwork's prepared, then maybe one of the lawyers wants revisions or amendments or additions to the paperwork, so then you're going back and forth on these various drafts, and this can really slow the process down, all right? And hearing this, a lot of individuals think, well, is there a quicker way to do this? Is there a more efficient way to do this? And the truth is, yeah, sometimes. And the way that can take place is if a party just tells their lawyer, look, just draft all the paperwork. Just do it all and do it quick because I want to get this case done quick. All right, well, what would be the downsides of that potentially? Well, the party who's paying their lawyer to draft all the settlement paperwork then is going to incur more in fees if the lawyer is the one doing it all. So while it might be quicker to have their lawyer just do the paperwork, you know, themselves and do it quicker if they're willing and able to do it, it's going to cost them some more money. So that can cause parties some pause where they want to have this divvied up. That way they're not incurring all the fees for having the settlement paperwork drafted. Of course, the other issue is sometimes the other attorneys won't agree to this. Like the guardian ad litem might insist, like, no, I'm going to do the parenting plan and I don't want another lawyer doing it. And another lawyer might object to the other lawyer drafting all the paperwork. I mean, maybe they want to draft a certain portion of it themselves because they think it's important for X, Y, or Z reason, all right? So even where a party is willing to pay their lawyer to draft all the settlement paperwork, you still have 1 or 2 other attorneys in the case. 2, if there's a guardian ad litem, and they have to agree to let the one lawyer draft everything, and they might not agree to it. Okay, so look, ultimately, who drafts the settlement paperwork, that could be a big issue. And it could be something that lots of parties don't think about, they don't contemplate, they don't even realize it's such a big deal, but it can be a big deal. And the other thing I would say, apart from the cost and the speed I've seen happen over the course of time, is that once it takes a while for the paperwork to get drafted, okay? So if we're talking about a case where it takes weeks or months to have this paperwork put together after there is a purported agreement, what I've seen happen in some cases is that the agreement unravels. And a lot of listeners would say, well, why is that? Well, look, there could be intervening events that take place that get the parties worked up or riled up, and now a party who is willing to settle doesn't want to settle anymore, okay? So, you know, I think time is important for parties who want to get the case done through settlement. If it's taken a long time to have this paperwork drafted, I think the chances grow by the day that the settlement agreement will never be put into play because intervening events will take place, like fights, arguments, bickering, or new ambiguities occur, or new events occur, or circumstances change, and so now parties don't want to sign the settlement paperwork anymore. So look, in most instances, if parties truly want to settle, it's important to have this paperwork done quickly and have both parties sign it and have the judge approve it before somebody gets cold feet or changes their mind. Of course, this is complicated for the reasons that I've just stated, that once you get 3 attorneys involved in terms of drafting the paperwork, hopefully it goes quick. And for the listeners, obviously, I'm sure that's what you want, for it to go quick and for it to be executed, by both parties in terms of signing it and the judge signing it. And so it's official. But in a lot of cases, you just have to realize from the date that the case purportedly settles to the date that the agreement is put together and the judge approves it, it could be weeks or months. And so that's sort of the dicey part of settlement agreements in divorce or family law that I wanted to cover here today. Okay, definitely an interesting topic for parties looking for more information on this topic. Again, going over to familylawheadquarters.com, read the article dated September 8th, 2025, titled "Who Should Draft the Settlement Paperwork?" This will give you more information on this topic. But thanks for tuning in today. Stay tuned for our next episode of Family Law Talk coming up. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to Family Law Talk with Kirk Stange. Visit StangeLawFirm.com for more about today's topic, or to put Stange Law Firm to work for your family today. The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely on advertisements. Neither the Supreme Court of Missouri or Illinois reviews or approves certifying organizations or specialist designations. The information you obtained in this podcast is not, nor is it intended to be, legal advice. You should consult an attorney for advice regarding your individual situation. We invite you to contact us and welcome your calls, letters, and electronic mail. Contacting us does not create an attorney-client relationship. Please do not send any confidential information to us until such time as an attorney-client relationship has been established. Past results afford no guarantee of future results, and every case is different and must be judged on its own merits. Kirk Stange is responsible for the content. Headquarters, Office 120 South Central Avenue, Suite 450, Clayton, Missouri 63105. Kirk Stange is licensed in Missouri, Illinois, and Kansas.